Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you.
Radio legends, welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. This episode, for those of you listening, is going to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more rogue. We are currently in Montana in the United States. This is a semi-live podcast, one of the first ones that we're doing. It is 1 a.m. on September the 8th of September. And we've been hunting elk. We've had 2 days of hunting elk here as the season opened on the 6th of September. Elk and deer, that is, and we were previously hunting pronghorn, as you would have heard. But we just wanted to follow on from last semi-live podcast and talk about the last 2 days, because you know what, I'm just going to say it here. You're all listening, which we appreciate. This is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but we've already filled one of the 6 tags, and we're going to unpack it all here on the podcast, and I can't wait to get to you and inform you guys as to how it all transpired. It's been a magical day, hence the big day as well, and the fact that we're still driving after dropping meat and all that type of stuff off, and the skull off to a friend. So massive thank you to our friend here in Montana who's taking care of the meat. It's going to hopefully feed his friends and family and everyone for the next year, which is absolutely crucial. What it's all about for us is hunting with like-minded people and being a part of a really good community. So we'll jump into the show. No FAQs today because we're currently driving 80 miles per hour down the freeway, but we will have plenty in store, and we hope you guys enjoyed this version of a semi-live recount from here in Montana with 2 very tired individuals, but very motivated to try and build on this momentum. As I said, 1 of 6 tags now filled in Montana, and it's only been a couple of days of bow hunting, so absolutely epic stuff. We'll get into the podcast.
Born out of necessity, Day 6 designs and builds specialised equipment for hunters. Their arrows are bomb-proof and consistent. I'm currently running their 275 spine shafts. The split between the usual 250 and 300 spine shaft is perfect for the heavier broadhead that we run. Coming in at 11.8 grains per inch, this setup is perfect for all game here in Australia and beyond.
Well, I think we should probably start with the history of this hunt. So I'd actually gone to this spot 4 years ago now for a day, and it was a very, rushed trip after shooting my first elk. And to be honest, I just straight away, within a day, saw plenty of deer, plenty of antelope, and actually saw a couple of elk. And it's not a very well known about spot. It's all public land, just all BLM. So anyone can come and hunt it, but everyone knows about it for antelope, a little bit about deer, but not really about the elk. And I've got a very good friend over here that has looked after us very well, and he hunts the elk here, and so it's a bit of a kept secret, I guess, with his family and close group of friends. And he pretty much set us up, told us where they'd been seeing them and stuff like that. And so we had very good intel, local intel, which is extremely important going into this hunt, which, as you'll obviously hear, paid dividends in the success of this hunt.
So I guess we, as you'd heard, had been hunting antelope for the previous few days since arriving in Montana. But as far as we were concerned, our main objective, I think for James and I, this is speaking on behalf of both of us, was to sort of get into the elk early, just because there are limited numbers of them there, and where we're hunting is as you'll see in the footage, extremely vast open areas with these big draws and big gully systems, as we like to call it over here in Australia. But basically these elk are feeding in very visible areas. Like, we've been getting up high, and when I say high, it's not super high mountains or anything like that, but there is this really sort of escarpment country, bluffy, sort of breaky kind of country, as I'd say. And we've been getting up high on first light, which is around 6 a.m. here in Montana, and we've been glassing for, hours to potentially find game. In the form of the elk, we were lucky on opening morning. Again, since seeing some elk on the previous days that you would have heard in the last podcast, seeing a few cows in the area and not wanting to spook them, we sort of left this area that we thought they might be feeding. And come Saturday, September 6th, we headed out there, got the glass out, had the spotting scope out, binoculars, and virtually immediately spotted this big mob of elk. And when I say big mob, it was, 30, maybe 40 individuals when you account for all the satellite bulls, the spikers, all those different animals. But there was at least 2 or 3 bulls that I would say caught our eye, definitely. And again, for me, I was up with the bow. As someone that's never hunted elk personally with like a tag in my pocket, I didn't really know what I was coming into here. Like, I didn't have a score, didn't have anything in mind. It just was purely if I see a bull that I like, the hunt feels right, whatever you want to say it, however cliche you want to say it, I'm going to go and stalk it. And fortunately for me, like, I feel like we set the bar fairly high, but as you're about to hear, on the first day, we got into a stalk nice and early, which was really, really beneficial for me, being able to learn a lot from that and take a lot of experience out of it as well as see an elk up close and have the bow and go through all those processes myself in making, the call to try and obviously get it on the deck.
And so after we found this considerable herd of elk, like Ayden said, we identified there was 2 shooters in there. And after watching them for quite a while, considering factor in this was, it was about -2 degrees Celsius or about 27 degrees Fahrenheit on that morning. So it was bitterly cold, like really, really cold. And we ended up watching these elk out in the field, and sort of 2 bulls, one of the identified like shooter bulls, split off with another little, sort of raghorn satellite and came up to the draws one way, and the rest of the herd with the herd bull sort of went another way, and not wanting to pressure the main herd, plus also not really wanting to stalk an extra 30 set of eyes to get a bull that was only sort of marginally bigger. We opted to go and stalk the 2 bulls that had split off, and one being like a definite shooter and a really good bull. And as they were moving around, we actually moved around the top of this sort of small ridge basin, I guess, to go and get a better look into some of these breaks and gullies that they were going to be coming up, just so we could identify exactly where they were going to go and bed down for the day. Because there's like pretty huge temperature swings. Like, it'll be 0 in the morning Celsius, 32 roughly, and then goes up all the way up to sort of 70, 80s during the day. Massive temperature swings, does get quite hot and uncomfortable, and so there's not a lot of shade, like what Ayden said, except for in these deep gullies. And so identifying where in these sort of deep gullies that have thickets and whatnot, it just increases our chance that we're going to be successful. So we're able to sort of limit it down using Onyx to a couple of different creeks or gullies, or however you want to say it, draws, and just waited for the wind to get a bit better in the middle of the day.
So we waited from 6 a.m. I think it got to around 11 a.m. and we sort of had decided that by 10 a.m. they should get up, have their first bed, and then by 11 be settled down for their second bed. So that was sort of our rationale. Plus we were waiting for the thermals to get a little bit better, and the wind direction to just become more consistent as it got later into the midday. And as James was saying, we dropped down off our sort of elevated position where we had a vantage point and we were glassing. and went to where we'd last seen these bulls. And basically the way we have it, if you can imagine, from your elbow to your wrist is like one draw system, and then it gets to your wrist and branches off into your thumb on your left, just say your index finger, your fingers, and you've got 5 of those. Now imagine if every finger has another set of hands, and then every one of those little sets of hands on every single finger have another set of hands, and it just keeps expanding. And that's what we're basically hunting. What it looks like on maps is these little draw systems that start out, a bit larger. It might be the size of, 60 to 100 meters wide, and they come in off these fields or these, pastures or feeding areas, and they get really narrow until they're basically tiny little, gullies and hidey holes and things like that. But from like where we're sitting on an elevated position, you're like, oh, if an elk moved in there, like I'd be able to see it. But then when you actually get down in there, you don't realize that they're just choked full of all different brush, vegetation, dense thickets. Some of the cutouts in the actual banks themselves, you could nearly park a truck in. Like, they're just massive. So let alone like a bull or 2 bulls in this instance going to try and hide. And that's why we really spent a lot of time trying to glass to see if we could relocate them coming out. And the other thing is, if we drop down from our vantage point too early and those bulls are in fact still moving and pop out, there's nearly no way of actually spotting them once you're in those draws or off your elevated point, because there's so many little folds in the topography that it all looks super flat. But you go over a tiny little 1 or 2 meter rise, and then you look down and there's this 10 meter gully, and then you come up 100 meters away and it looks flat again, and you just keep doing that all day, and there's all these little green patches in there. And that's why the elk and the animals are moving through those draws, is because there's no trees on this landscape, as you'll see in the footage. We're pretty much hunting, I guess, prairie country. Like, it's very much stony, a lot of rock, a lot of short sort of grass, very few trees. As I said, there's a lot of sage and brush and stuff like that. And these animals get into these draws where there's more growth, and that's, I think, purely just a shade and dampness sort of perspective. Is that, as you imagine a bit of grass growing under a tree because it's not getting scorched and burnt by the sun, the vegetation in these draws has the chance to actually grow a bit longer and stay a bit lusher, and that's why it gets longer, and then the deer go and bed in there and feed in there. It's just perfect little microcosms or environments for these animals. And we'd gone down and we'd basically narrowed it to 3 gullies that sort of were all interconnected from where we'd last seen the bulls drop into one of the other gullies. And from there, we basically just said, all right, which way is the wind going to be the best to come in? And we set up on an Onyx maps a pin where we thought they were. We then did a bit of an area around that to make sure that we covered it, fully. And then we also started a tracking feature on Onyx and went and started with, the gully of least concern as far as the wind would go, for spooking the other 2 gullies so that we could cover all the, ground that we wanted to, essentially. And it was really, really cool to just like tick that off and be super, super thorough and basically leave no stone unturned. And James and I, again, it's stinking hot, drop down into the draws, walk them, basically peering over, glassing, would go another 50 to 100 meters, peer in, glass. If it got to the point where you had to walk in there, we'd walk in there, but very, very diligently just trying to find these bull elk.
And I think the thing that shocked me was, like, from above, like what you said, these draws, it's like, oh no, that, you'd see an elk walking in there, and like there was a distinct moment where like one half walked down a ridge and then just like disappeared, and we're like, oh no, we should be able to see it in there. And it's just like, you work out that it's a lot deeper and the banks are a lot higher than anticipated, and because of that, then you've got these brush that just like grow along the side of these banks, and like you're looking at these gullies on Onyx and you're like, oh no, I don't think there would be anything that would be good enough for shade along there. But then once you actually go and look, you've got these sort of brushy little trees that are probably maybe 8 foot high, so not super high, but what they do is they there's generally game trails underneath them, and they just offer this perfect cover situation where they can pretty much plonk down right on a game trail, and then they've got this cover above them. And because generally speaking, it's all this brush is on both sides, but when they're on the eastern side of these little draws, you then get obviously cover for most of the day. Same with these cutout banks. Like we had a couple today bed up in the side of a couple of cows, elk, bed up in the side of a bank like mule deer, and I just, they've obviously adapted to their environment and their climate where there's not a lot of shade, but they've certainly found it, and hence went and found these bulls. Know where you stand with onX, the most accurate GPS mapping tech for outdoor enthusiasts, trusted by millions of hunters worldwide. We utilize onX whilst hunting in the US. Its mapping systems, specialist drop pins, tracking features, topographical maps, and accuracy is unmatched. Being able to plan and prepare for our hunts overseas in the comfort of our own home is a game changer. If you're looking at hunting in the US, Canada, or Alaska, then onX is a must.
So yeah, we'd ruled out the first gully or draw, which leading into it, we sort of didn't think they were in. There was probably our sort of least likely of scenarios to find them in. But again, being diligent, we ruled it out, doubled back and sort of came back on our own tracks, jumped into the next draw, and we were sort of sitting there umming and ahhing, looking at it, and it didn't look like much on maps compared to the other draw. And I think both James and I were kind of looking at each other going, oh, I think that next draw is going to be the best one, the one that is most prominent. But for argument's sake, and to do it properly and just say that, nah, we've done it and left no stone unturned, we went and walked this other draw, and honestly, we hadn't really gone very far. We'd probably only gone 150 metres up and into it. And we're up on the bank. We were actually on the western side looking in, because again, from the western side of these draws, we could look down and catch the shade all along these good game trails on the eastern side, which is where we assumed the animals would be. Being around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon now, we didn't think the animals would be in full sun, as it was quite hot. It's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, high 20s if you're thinking in Celsius from back in Australia. So it's not overly hot for us. Like, we do a lot of hunting for the chittle deer and bantang and pigs and buffalo back home, and you can get 35, 40 degree days pretty easily, whereas it's not super hot. But when you're in the sun and literally zero shade because there's not a single tree on the landscape, it gets hot very, very quickly. So these bulls and these animals are tucking into that eastern side of the little draws, like James was saying. And with the bulls, I remember James and I were discussing it, because he was like, oh, just be careful, they can really jump into these bushes. And I said, I imagine like a mule deer would or a cow elk would, but I just said I can't see a big bull like fully jumping into some of these little bushes, just because I imagine his antlers would get caught up, and it would almost feel like someone was pulling his hair. If you can imagine, like, a human female with long hair trying to like sit in a little tangle or nest of, whatever. So that's like, again, shit analogy. It is 1 a.m, 1:15 now by the time you're listening. So we're a little bit tired, so we're not doing the best here. But basically, we were sort of expecting them to be on those more open gullies or edges of the gullies on the game trails, and we come around the next corner and I just caught a tiny little glimpse of antler and stopped immediately. Didn't want to get skylined any further, and was doing very minimal movements to make sure that we wouldn't get picked out. And if you listen to the prior podcast on the antelope hunting, you would have heard about how honed in those animals were and how good their eyesight was. And I think hunting them for the few days earlier had probably really refined, just our stealth, I guess, and making sure that we were super, super hidden, as well as being super careful. And it really helped in these instances on the elk, where basically we were able to like see the elk over a ridge where there wasn't very much cover, sort of be on the edge of being skyline, but quickly drop back down and confirm that, you know, we'd seen it. So, you good?
Yeah, I thought I saw a fucking deer.
Sorry, James is just driving and
Like a psycho.
did a weird little maneuver, and I was like, I wasn't sure if he was nodding off or if he, yeah. Anyway, apparently he saw a deer, but anyhow, we will continue with the story. Apologies about that. Again, semi-live, so you don't get the more refined,
Polished.
edited version of the polished podcast. This is very much coming to you from the Grand Cherokee. Again, doing 81 miles per hour on a highway here in Montana. So
We one thing that I said to Ayden as well, going back to the glassing stuff, it wasn't necessarily like thinking that a bull could be in there. There was just a couple of spots that had like a bench. Like I agreed with Ayden and thought they'd most likely be on those open game trails, but it was more that there was a couple of spots where like you could see there was extra little hiding spots, and like we'll get to what was bedded in there or some of these spots in day 2, but yeah, they definitely, I mean, more likely a mule deer or, you know, a cow elk or something like that, but, you know, that smaller bull that this fella was with definitely could have been up in these little sort of secondary benches, I guess, where like halfway up there'd be like a little gully coming off the main one, if that makes sense, and that would cause like a little flat spot, you know, above the floor, the valley floor, that, you know, would have all good trees around it and stuff, and definitely could have led into a bed. So yeah, but we as soon as we found these bulls, we crossed over the drainage to get up onto their side, and interestingly enough, like as we were moving in, we'd done this huge loop. Like it would have been probably 1.5 Ks to get the wind right, to be, you know, super vigilant. And like we said, we had all the time in the world, so I was like, let's just do everything right, don't half-ass it. And we're moving up, trying to get above these bulls so Ayden can shoot one of them, you know, straight down almost. And as we're moving in, the first one, the smaller of the two that was further away, actually got our wind. Do you want to take it from here?
yeah, so I'll just backtrack slightly. I remember like dropping down off the ridges saying like, if we find these bulls, I think we're going to kill one, being super positive, and just had a really good feeling about it, because again, looking at Onyx, I sort of try to do a bit of a yardage in terms of from the east side of the draws to the west side, which was basically like top bank to top bank, and you had the draw in between. Most of the time it was about 35-40 yards where we assumed these bulls were. So in my head I was like, even if they're on the furthest side and we come in sort of perpendicular to them on the bank, it's going to be a 30 or 40 meter shot, which I've been feeling super comfortable with. And just having that in mind, I was also like, it's two animals, they've both got big racks. Like there was a 6x6 and a 5x5. In my head I was like, an animal the size of a horse, maybe a little bit of a smaller horse in the form of a bull elk with, say, you know, 45, 50 inch, 60 inch antlers, whatever they are, long, and all these tines, we're going to be able to see it. And if we do see it, we're going to be able to kill it, because there's only two of them. The wind should be pretty good. Like we've done all this work to get the wind right. They're bedded. It's the best time of the day. Like we're just so many factors going, you know, according to plan, going stacked in our favour. And to be honest, I really likened it to, you know, what I'd say is a chittle deer hunt, like back home, where it's all a game of 1%ers, and to that point we'd done every single thing right. And when we'd seen these bulls, my only concern about not coming in perpendicular and shooting across the bank rather than actually crossing it, you know, 100 meters shy of where we had to get to and getting up on the same bank that they were under, was only because it was super open and the two bulls were bedded about 20 meters apart, and it looked like the bull that I didn't want to shoot that was further away was basically bedded facing straight up the way that we needed to approach if we were to stay on that far side. So I was a little bit worried about that. So we basically had a bit of a discussion and ended up swapping, taking the boots off. And long story short, you'll see in all the footage and everything, like we've documented it super well, like hats off to James, he's been able to capture the first few days really, really well on film. But we managed to sneak into about 35 yards of the bigger bull, which was actually the closer bull. And as James said, the first bull, which was further away, another 20 metres past our bull, when we were sitting there at 30 metres, 35 yards, he actually got the wind died down, like it was blowing consistently in our face, and for a split second it died off. And unfortunately in that split second, I think the thermals must have dragged it uphill or something like that had happened. And basically this bull had got a whiff of our scent and just took off very quickly but very silently up the draw. And again, because there weren't trees, there was no crashing through trees or timber or anything like that. And you wouldn't believe it, but the bull that he was with, again, because he was probably wrapped around a little bit of that draw and a little bit of the bank, never heard a single thing and stayed bedded. But I'd actually got up from where I was, crept forward a little bit, and thought that the other bull would be, trying to hightail it, and he wasn't whatsoever. He was dead asleep. It's just that when I ranged him there at 35 metres, he was facing... His body was sort of laying towards us in a front-on situation. He had his head turned, covering all his vitals. So there was absolutely no way to shoot him where he lay. And then it became pretty much a waiting game.
And so we've got a pretty good situation. I'm not going to lie, in my head, and I'm sure whether you had the thought as well, but, obviously the first bulls winded us. One of the major problems was, I think we had, the thermals were going up the hill, we were down the hill, and when I say hill, I'm talking about the difference in elevation over a 100 meter period might be 10 meters or something, pathetically small. But yeah, obviously enough that the thermals had caught that first bull, but it hadn't dropped down for that second bull. It was in my mind that potentially this other bull may get it. So though I thought, he should have got us the first time, but the smaller bull that was further away did. So maybe it'd be fine. And we ended up sitting there for about half an hour, and I couldn't see him very well, but I could see, Ayden getting excited, and he was obviously shaking his head and, showing signs that he was potentially going to get up. And I'm filming little sections here and there of Ayden's movements and stuff like that. And, I had actually the smaller lens with me at the time. I should have brought the bigger one to film it a little bit better. But, all of a sudden the wind must have changed, and sadly the bull got up and he's gone running up the ridge. And Ayden's done a couple of red deer hind calls, and I've tried to do it. I had to read a diaphragm in my mouth for ages and done this shitty cow call. And anyway, he got enough of us that he knew something was happening, and he ran out of there, and we chased after him for a little bit, and then did a chat, and within honestly 2 minutes, I reckon, maybe 3 minutes, he was out the top of the drainage, which would have been 800 to a K. It was actually very impressive just how quickly he'd covered all that ground, and a bit of a learning for us. That maybe going in perpendicular was probably going to be the better option, the higher success option. And hopefully put us in a better spot in the future.
Whether it's hunting, fishing, hiking, or any other activity in the great outdoors, Dog and Gun Coffee is ready to fuel your adventures. Their preloaded drip filters are a game changer and help you enjoy cafe quality coffee in the wild. Their dark roast, the Samba blend, is my personal favourite. The legends over at Dog and Gun Coffee have extended their support to you to help us discover your brew of choice today. Use code TWIN10, that's numerical number 10, at checkout for $10 off your first order.
Yeah, and that's where I think, like for me, I think we did literally everything right in that stalk, as far as like the information that we had was concerned. Like if that was, again, I just likened a lot of this hunting to what we're doing here to Chiddle Deer back home, where you just want to stay in the game for as long as possible. And I just think from my understanding, the wind was pretty good that day, especially. It had blown super consistent, and then again, like the fact that we were able to sit off him for half an hour, I was pretty confident that, you know, at some point, like his antlers, as James had said, started to come in contact with the sun, and you could tell he was getting hot, he was getting a bit agitated. He'd started moving a fair bit, turning his head left and right, unless there were insects or something annoying him, but nothing's really seemed to be too fazed by any like flies or anything like that, or insects. But I think it was more just he was getting hot, like that shade, you know, again, trying to hide a horse-sized animal in areas where there aren't trees, they come into the contact with the sun pretty quickly, and that's where, to be honest, it was a learning curve for me, again, because that was our first, literally opening day, first stalk on a bull, and to get to 30 meters, I was kind of like, that bull felt like he was dead, and then to obviously have it not go that way and have him run off unscathed was a massive learning opportunity. But I also left that feeling super devastated, because I was like, what if that was our one chance on a bull elk? And anyway, I just thought I need to really learn from that and come in perpendicular if I get another opportunity again. I think maybe the antelope again had scared me with their vision as to not being too exposed, whereas like with the antelope, you know, come over a tiniest little rise and you haven't even got your hat and binoculars, like that's all that you've exposed, and you see an antelope from 300 meters away and it's already looking at you, like it knows you're there. And I think maybe I was carrying that into the fact that these elk could be doing the same, whereas you watch the antelope, they rarely actually like shut their eyes and nod their heads and fall asleep, whereas the elk are like, these bulls, they had their racks laying on their backs and swinging in the brush, and like they were pretty chill, pretty out of it. So I just remember thinking, you know, from that stalk, yes, while it was really good and satisfying getting into 30 meters of that bull, it also was pretty gut-wrenching to have it not, you know, work out the way we wanted after putting so much effort in and thinking that we'd done everything right. And I just sort of took that as a massive learning opportunity to carry into day two, should we get the opportunity, which, as I said, we've you know, filled one of 6 tags today. So, you know, spoiler alert, an animal hits the deck today, which we'll start to unpack now, I guess, because we don't have a heap more time before we get back to camp.
So, second day for Ayden hunting elk ever. Second day of deer and elk legal hunting here in Montana for 2025, and we're back on our glassing knob super early, and find the same herd of elk, 30 strong animals, just say, with that herd bull, that probably the same one that we'd seen from the day before. When we say we've seen elk, like we're talking like, 3 miles away, like probably 5 kilometers away. So, you can easily identify, oh yeah, that's an elk, but you can't necessarily and you can say that's a bull and all this stuff, but you're not really it's pretty hard to actually identify size from that distance. We've got, really good Leopold spotting scopes, like top of the line, great glass, and even with them, and especially because we're talking about really low lighting too, and then all of a sudden you get the heat waves starting, and it gets pretty hard to look at those extreme distances. But for the most part, the mag view's been really good at getting some footage and checking out things and just documenting it. But this herd of elk actually left the pasture that they've been feeding on quite quickly, I'd say, and started moving up into some of these breaks and stuff, and we ended up shifting spots similar to the first day, just trying to keep eyes on them and put ourselves in the best position to actually, find where these elk were going to go, because they can drop into any little draw, and like what Ayden said, your wrist turns into your hands, and then your hands turn into more and more fingers of these little gullies, and even though it's like 30 elk, like they could be in any of them, and they can actually hide really well.
I think for me, like going into this morning, I was super optimistic that we'd find elk. One, because we'd seen them the day before, unfazed, unpressured, and it was so early in the season. But two, like there always is in the back of your mind, like are there other hunters, we're on public land, all that type of stuff. So seeing them, nearly just hit a mule deer, seeing them this second morning was such a relief. But I was also like expecting it, I would say, because we'd only stalked the two bulls, and even though we'd obviously spooked those two bulls, the other mob, or the 30 cows and the other bull, had gone and done, I'm assuming, what they've been doing for the last few weeks to months or whatever, and have a bit of a pattern. And we pretty much saw them, as James said, and whilst they were moving off the pasture a little bit quicker, they were pretty much taking the same route that we'd seen them the previous day. So as James said, we ducked around, and to be honest, they actually fed quite quickly, as they have been doing. Like in this open country, they sort of get out of the draw and they run across a ridge in a matter of seconds, if not a minute, and it's pretty cool to watch. You'll see like 30 elk in this instance, and a few satellite spikers and stuff on the periphery, pretty much just hightail it across a ridge, get to the edge, look down into the draw, and then just slowly single file walk into the draw. And then they'll be in the draw for 1 minute, 10 minutes, half an hour, and then they'll just pop up on the next little ridge, which might actually be 700 meters up the draw. And it's so hard to kind of like predict where they're going to pop out. It's literally like that whack-a-mole game where, I know kids, and there's viral videos of cats like trying to paw at this little thing that pops out of all these different little holes. And that's almost what it feels like when you're looking down on this landscape. You're like, all right, they were heading that way, so they should pop out that gully next, and then they pop out a mile away, and you're like, okay, what the hell? How did they even get there? And it's really cool to watch. But in this morning's instance, these cows actually fed towards us at a rate where we got up and packed up, like set the spotting scope up, we're watching them going, yep, cool, they're in that draw. Oh shit, the wind is a bit unpredictable at the moment. Let's do a massive loop. And we basically moved a mile 3 or 4 times, so 3 or 4 miles of the morning, keeping eyes on the elk the whole time, but just to get away from them, basically. Like we didn't want to get in on them at that point because the wind wasn't perfect, and there was more risk of trying to make something happen more suddenly than if we had just kept waiting and playing that sort of slow and calculated, very methodical, stay in the game sort of stalk. And I'm super glad we did, because again, from 6 a.m. when it was daylight, we saw these elk, and we literally watched them get to about 9, 10 a.m. And just before these elk bedded, actually, one of the highlights for me, which I remember saying in the video footage as James was filming, was it kind of became a rabbit or something just ran across the road. It kind of, for me, became less about trying to kill an animal that morning, and it was this one particular moment where the elk were coming up over a draw, and a coyote was like 60 meters below us, either caught our wind or saw our movement, but we weren't going to make a play on it just because the elk were so close. They were only probably 300 or 400 yards away at that point. And the coyotes ran straight across towards that elk draw that the elk were coming out of, and they basically met and started, the elk actually turned the tables and started chasing this coyote pair. And seeing that in the flesh, I remember saying to James, it's something that you see on Nat Geo or when you're watching, documentaries on Yellowstone and all that type of stuff. But to be able to watch it in the flesh, the two of us, was so cool. And it was cool to watch that transpire, and then watch these elk basically duck into the last little gully between us and them. And we were sitting there going, oh geez, surely they're not going to stay in there. Like, it's too small to have 30 elk in there, blah, 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 blah. Like looking at onyx, looking at, the different levels of vegetation in there. But we also were like, in saying that, they could go in there. Like, they seem like they want to go in there. And sure enough, we watched them bed down, and we were basically using these two little cows on the very far left periphery as the animals that we were watching. Like, we couldn't see the other 28 or so cows and the bulls. We were literally just watching two cows that kept getting up, would bed every hour, get up, bed. And it got to the point where it got to about 12 o'clock, and James and I again were like, yep, wind's perfect, let's go and make a move based on where we last saw the bull head into that little draw. Around 12 lunchtime, we'd actually stopped, had a coffee, a dog and gun coffee on the ridge, which was a bit of a nice luxury. Again, just because of the day before, watching those bulls for such a long period of time, we knew that, you know, we might be sitting there waiting for them to bed down and making sure the wind got, you know, right, and then be able to sneak in. And the exact same thing happened today, except for this time we weren't looking for two bulls, we were looking for 30 plus odd animals in this basin, but we had a rough idea of where they were because we could see those two little cows. And anyway, again, super pivotal to, you know, the success of this hunt is using Onyx. And we put a pin where we thought those cows were on the bend. I put another pin where I thought the bull was. I measured how far away it was. Again, I measured before we got down there how wide I thought the creek was. All these sorts of things just to give us or the draw was, sorry. All these things just to give us any sort of little insight or inkling into making us more successful should the time come as we get closer. And it turned out pretty much perfect. And again, because there were so many elk, they had to spread out, you know, over a couple 100-meter stretch of this draw, is what it seemed like, but from where we actually found some cows and could see others and whatnot. But where we went to was very specific in my mind, because I wanted to go to where I'd last seen the bull and then go, you know, just on the downwind side of that, so that we gave ourselves a bit more leeway. And basically, again, I knew that there was 30 cows in there, but I was like, hopefully, fingers crossed, if the bull's there with them, or if we can see him, we should be able to see his antlers. And I sort of lived by that a little bit, and we basically got into probably about 70 meters from the far side, so again, the east side of these draws. And every 5 to 10 meters, I'd just sort of pop my head over very slowly, have a look, sorry, and that's just another mule deer on the side of the road. Would basically have a look and go, oh, okay, yep, nothing there, all good. I'll, you know, duck back a couple of steps so I'm not skylined, move another 5 or so meters up, and glass over the little ridge down into that draw again. And keeping in mind that we're on the western side, which is super sunny, super exposed, super lit. So when you've got someone with a bow and binoculars and then a cameraman, you know, a couple meters behind him, if we take 2 or 3 wrong steps or don't look far enough down the draw and there's a bit of a divot and there's cows bedded there or feeding or something like that, they will spot you so quickly. So this was super slow and tactful, and basically we just did that for, geez, I reckon it must have been 20 minutes, maybe half an hour or so, that James and I were just doing that. And it got to a point where we found a cow, and she just stood up and she started doing a bit of browsing, and she sort of fed from where I thought the bull was a bit further downwind or down this draw. And I just told James to stay where he was because I didn't want to risk 2 of us trying to move in and you know, identify a bit more ground and unfurl a bit more ground in front of us there. But I just went a few more steps to the right and then glass, and a few more steps to the right and glass, and I pretty quickly turned up, like, honestly, I reckon it would have been about 15 of the 30 cows. And I'm like, okay, there seems to be a vast majority of cows here. Like, I can see other cows about 100 meters up the draw, but the vast majority seem to be here, which for me made me think, like, all right, the bull's probably here. I had seen him go this way, you know, albeit a couple of hours ago. But the fact that, you know, this is where a lot of the cows are is definitely a good sign, or a good part to have. And I don't know if you want to add anything to this story or me just keep going, but
I think firstly I would just confirm, so because you said said east and west side. So we came in from the west side, just confirming that once again. It's now 1:43 a.m. We got up at 4:40 yesterday a.m. So, and we're getting up at 4:40 tomorrow a.m. But anyway, so yeah, we came in the west side, today in 2 hours. We're gonna sleep, and then by the time we get home and sleep, we'll be back up about 2.5 hours. But anyway, so yeah, came in from the west side on this herd of elk, and yeah, I think just what everything Ayden was doing was perfect. You know, like he was just popping over. I think all the stuff that all the stalks and everything we'd had on the antelope, and I think I actually said it 2 days ago or something. I said, like I said, you know, hunting muleys and elk compared to hunting antelopes is going to be like refreshing almost, where they're not going to be spotting you as you pop your head over a lip at a couple of 100 yards. Like, yeah, and Ayden, just tiptoed along, just glassing. I just sat there, probably only 10 meters away, but you know, as you take a step, you reveal so much more country. And eventually he heard what he said was a little like sort of maybe an antler hitting some timber or something like that, and he's like, okay, well, that's where the bull sort of is, and gestured to me that's where the bull was.
If you have ever thought of overseas travel and hunting in the United States, then listen up. Whether it be an annual trip or a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, Hunting Full and the consultancy team will cater for your needs. I've been utilising their service for a couple of years now and could not be happier with it. The whole team, from the admin staff to their hunt advisors, has been a pleasure to work with. Hunting Full not only helped me draw one of the best tags in Montana, but we sat down and had multiple meetings to construct a hunt strategy to ensure I had the best hunt possible. If you're interested in using Hunting Full's license application services to draw more tags across the Western United States, email applications@huntingfull.com. That is application@huntinfool.com, and mention Twin Elements to get 25% off your first year of service. The Hunting Full team will take care of the rest.
Yeah, so I initially heard, again, what I'd call raking, and it wasn't the bull actually standing. I think he'd just turned his head from being bedded, and it must have, again, being quite an impressive bull, he was sitting under a tree, and the tree had like a live canopy, but then some of the branches that came down were dead and dying, and then there was some like quite woody, branches around him, and I reckon he must have just picked his head up and either thrown a stick or something or whatever, but he made this little noise, and it just, for me, I was like, all right, he's there's a bull there. Took a step, glass, couldn't see anything. Took a step, glass, took a step, looked to my left, more cows. Looked to my right, more cows. Took another step, like none of these animals could see me. Took another step, and then went, oh, holy shit, there's an antler. And straight away I knew it was him, because this bull in particular, like we watched him all morning. He was the herd bull. He'd ripped a bugle actually, which was pretty cool to hear, like our first, proper bugle up close during hunting season. And he had this very particular, he ended up being a 777, but he's pretty much a big 6'6" on both sides, but then his 6 tine has these 2 tiny little, what I call like crab claws or fish tails, where the 6 tine just splits into these 2 tiny little, extensions. So he was super identifiable, and I saw those because that was the highest point of his antler above, the ground that I could see, and knew straight away it was him. So I signaled to James that yep, we are on here, and basically told James to come around, and we just kept going. I actually got down a bit lower just because some of those cows were to the left, were sort of in our direct line of sight. But I ranged the bull, and we were at about 85 yards from him at that point. So we kept closing in, and I just remember thinking, I'm going to learn from the other day's experience. And I kept glassing him, ranged him, and was like, and this is a really important point here, is that, and this is probably just by chance, or maybe it's by design as to where he wanted to bed, particularly again compared to the cows, but all of the cows, so about 15 or so cows that I'd seen up to this point in this draw, were either bedded marginally, or not marginally, but like half in bushes, or completely surrounded and engulfed by bushes, and you'd just see like an ear flick in all this like dense prickly bush and woody sort of stuff. Whereas the bull, as soon as I laid eyes on him, he was bedded under this one tree that you'll see in the film is like fluorescent green, has a really nice canopy, and then underneath it there's very minimal cover, in the sense of like very minimal brush or anything like that, and it's almost like this little manicured half semicircle lawn, the size of like, I don't know, I can imagine like it being a bathroom or a living room or something like that. Like, there was not much of it, but the fact that it was just like lawn was absolutely perfect, because the way he was bedded was virtually pretty much broadside to me. And again, when I ranged him at 85, I'm like, in my head immediately, I'm like, I'm gonna shoot this bloke bedded as soon as I can. They were my thoughts. And again, maybe because I was a little bit triggered from the previous day and how it transpired after sitting off that bull for 30 minutes and then obviously having him wind us. But I just thought the shot is there. As soon as I can get close enough to take it, depending on obviously the factors that are coming back to me, I'm going to do so. And I just, again, with two of us trying to get in and being marginally skylined this whole time, I just was aware that the bow's shiny, my face is shiny, James behind me is shiny, James with a camera is shiny, add that we're in the sun on the western side of on the slope as well, and it's a recipe for getting spotted, especially when there's so many cows. Like, there's 30 cows in this little drainage that are looking out for this bull. So keeping all that in mind, we just slowly crept in, and very quickly it became, from 85 meters to about 60 meters. And I ranged him and I looked ahead, and I maybe could have slipped in another 5 meters, but I could also see 3 or 4 cows to my left. One was bedded with her head facing down, but she was facing directly my way, and if she had opened her eyes for whatever reason, I'd be in direct sight by now, because no longer was it sort of my head, but probably my upper body, even when laying down, that she could be able to see. And then to her left, there were another 2 cows that I could see. I couldn't see their heads, but I could see that they were feeding. And I just thought, if they if they continue feeding down this draw towards me, then there's going to be very soon no way that I can draw back. And again, just processing all of this super, super quickly and trying to be super hyper focused with minimal actual body movements, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of this is just scanning out of the periphery of my eyes and slowly raising the binos and confirming. I signaled to James and said, like, I'm going to shoot him here at 60. And it's funny, like, even now, James, as we're driving, looks at me and smiles, because for both of us, that is the furthest shot that we would ever take on game. Like, to this point, it's the furthest shot I've ever taken on an animal. But I just have been practicing with the new bow, the new Carbon RX9 by Hoyt, and I honestly love this setup. It's the best I've ever shot a bow. It shoots super quick, super flat. I'm shooting it at about 82 pounds. Again, using the option sight, the option 4S. So I have, a fixed 20, 30, 40 pin, and then a slider. And I just slid it down to 60 meters or 60 yards, and basically... Was there a buck?
Did you see it?
No.
It was a pretty good buck.
Yeah, right. Sorry, we're just driving back to...
I'm going to mark that.
Yeah, we're on public land, so we'll actually mark that, but we're just driving back to our camp at the moment, and James spotted a buck on the side of the road there. It's pitch black, but it's actually, we've had full moons the last few days, so you can actually see quite a bit even out to the periphery off the headlights. But I just remembered, and I say I just remembered, it happened this morning, so it's pretty fresh still, but it's all a little bit surreal. But I just said to James, like, I'm going to shoot him from here. Like, are you good? Can you see him well? And basically, he looked at me and was like, yep. And I just said, all right, well, edge out to my right so you can basically get me in the frame. He knows what he's doing, but in my mind, I was like, we've taken the time to get both of us in here. I want this shot to be absolutely perfect for both of us. And a key thing here for me is I actually laid down flat on my back, unclipped my bino harness and peeled it off, and then I took my hat off and took my face mask off, which I'd been using just again because I thought we were going to be skylined a fair bit. I just wanted to remove all shine, and I actually put my hat back on and left the face mask off, left the bino harness off, and said to James, like, I'm ready, like I'm gonna, as soon as the wind keeps blowing hard, I'm gonna sort of get to my knees, and then once the wind stops, get ready, because I'm gonna draw back the bow, and I'm gonna, like, obviously draw back, and if the pin's steady, I'm gonna shoot him. And from having that little conversation or that dialogue, it probably only took about a minute, I'd say, for me to go from laying on my back to coming up very slowly, watching those cows to my left, watching the bull, making sure that no one was looking, and basically came from, again, laying on my back to being on my knees. And
No, sorry, wrong one.
sorry, James has directed me down a wrong turn here.
Sorry.
Sorry, so as I was saying, semi-live, the perks, hey? As I was saying, you've really killed my train of thought. As I was saying, I rose to my, at the moment of suspense as well, I rose to my knees, had a range on him, and basically I was just sitting there, kneeling down, release aid clipped on the string, everything tension tight, just watching with my naked eye that none of those cows were looking to the left, making sure that I was down low, crunched over, basically not, showing too much of myself, again, because I didn't want to get any more skylined or anything like that. But I was essentially hiding behind the frame of my bow, waiting for it to stop being windy, basically, because we've had super windy conditions, like 20, 30, 40 kilometer hour winds at least most days. And especially when you're shooting at this range, like, again, confident at this range, practice it all the time, but on a live animal, it's a shot that I don't normally take. But again, because this bull elk was bedded and bedded perfectly, the one thing that I was aiming for is when so the wind dies down and I draw back, and when I drew back, I just was looking at this tiny little bit of mud that was right on his shoulder, and the way he was bedded was his ass was to the left and his face was to the right as I was looking at him, and he was perfectly broadside. And now I wanted to sneak that arrow in just to the left of his scapula on the front leg, so just behind the scapula, but so close to it that it's nearly kissing it, so that it takes out as much lung as possible, and pretty much just hit him on this little speck of dirt where he'd been wallowing, because that was pretty much his dead middle of the body, and I knew that from a better position, like, that would hit the most lung. And drew back, and to be honest, like, watching the footage back, it felt like I probably was at full draw for, not a long time, but like I was definitely, what I said to myself at the time was push and pull, and I just pushed on the bow forward in my left hand, and being a right-hander, just kept pulling back through the shot. And at some point the shot broke, and to be honest, I just watched that arrow flight and then the arrow disappear, and it flew so true. Like, it was, honestly, I can't wait for everyone to see the footage, and you guys listening to this are getting a bit of an insight now, obviously, and hearing it, but like, you can probably speak to this a little bit, like watching it through the viewfinder and being able to slow it down like 1 frame per second, and the benefits of footage. But like, that shot could not have been any more on the money, really. Like, it was pretty much perfect in terms of where I was aiming, where the arrow hit, and for that to happen at 60 meters with, a live animal, for me was like, gave me a lot of confidence, but was also super rewarding knowing that all that work and shooting and everything, like, prior to this trip had paid off. And that bull raced from his feet, and to be honest, he'd already started getting up before the arrow had got there, like, which is amazing. Like, he had probably, rather than say getting up, he'd probably like literally raise his knuckles as if to move, but it was enough to like change the shot by probably an inch or so. But the bull gets up. Immediately I can see where the arrows hit him, and my immediate thought is, yep, that's a dead bull. He then ran up this little steep bank that he was bedded under, gets to the top of the draw, which is probably only like 15 meters high, and just stops there, and he's actually turned to the left. So now the arrow hit him on his right side, and I could see where the point of entry was, and then I could see where the exit was, and it was pretty much tight on that shoulder as well. And I just like was like, yep, go down, go down, go down. This bull's so dead. And what happened next was amazing. Like, this bull, honestly, if we were to watch the footage back, I reckon for about a minute and a half, just stood there and was like doing little semicircles and would get the wobbly boot, and for whatever reason was just fighting it, would not succumb to the effects of that arrow and go down. Even after doing an autopsy on him and checking out that we'd shot both of his lungs, like, he was just so determined to obviously live. And they're such big animals, such tough animals, but ultimately the effects of a razor sharp Cayuga broadhead tipped arrow with the day 6 shaft behind it punched through his lungs, and he'd sort of started coughing up a heap of blood, which is the first sign I was like, yep, he's going to drop down here in a second. And as you know, luck would have it, or the irony, he basically somersaulted down that little cliff that he'd run up, and pretty much ended up about 5 meters from his bed where I'd actually shot him. So, you know, he'd barely gone, you know, a tiny little distance. And what was really, really cool is to know that, you know, everything that we've come over here and traveled all the way over to, you know, Montana in the United States to do this hunt had sort of gone down. But what was really cool was to actually just watch the cows get up out of the draw, and they were just sitting there looking around, none the wiser. Like, they had no clue what was going on, which, again, very, very cool, and a reminder that we're, you know, did our job properly. Like, those animals had basically no idea that we were there, in the sense of they'd heard that bull go down, heard him crash, all looked around, none of them barked, and then they slowly just peeled away and went over the next couple of ridges out of sight. And, you know, James and I celebrated accordingly. There was a lot of hugging, you know, just being thankful for the opportunity to come out here and do this hunt, how hard we've worked in such a short period of time to get these opportunities, and then obviously for the shot to go down the way it did was a dream come true. And, you know, we then got to have the excitement of starting to walk up to that bull.
Specialising in high-quality supplements and nutrition, from electrolytes and hydration add-ins to their wild bars, Atlas Wild helps to fuel our outdoor adventures. Their Regenerate lineup has been a game changer whilst hunting up north in the heat and humidity. It's perfect for those on the quest for hydration when losing lots of sweat. With grape, lemon lime, blue raspberry and orange flavours, there's something for everyone. Another favourite of mine is their Fusion lineup. It's my go-to for rest and recovery towards the end of a day. It's perfect for a big pack out. Now available in peach iced tea and lemon lime flavours. When shopping on the Atlas Wild website, be sure to use code TWIN10. That's TWIN 10 numerically for 10% off your next order.
Just rewinding, I didn't want to interrupt your story except for when I did. But yeah, he fucking nailed that shot. Even now, like I said, like, it's still fresh. I mean, it's only been 12 hours or so since it all went down. But yeah, he absolutely smoked him. Like, I agree. Like, he was not really like as soon as the arrow hit, I was like, oh, this thing's cooked. And he just fought it and fought it and fought it. And obviously eventually succumbed to the arrow. It was actually quite peaceful, you know, just in general, like what he said, with all the cows and everything like that. And like, everything was none the wiser. And yeah, we've certainly put in the yards. Like, I mean, we've still got more to go. Like what we said, we're going to get up in like 2 and a bit hours to go and check these elk again. Just trying to make the most of the opportunities we can while we're over here. But yeah, hopefully we can find another bull nearly as good as Ayden's, because he was a proper cracker, and definitely one of these things that I don't know, like, yeah, didn't really have any expectations on size, like, but yeah, like when we were walking up to it, like, holy shit, this thing is like actually like a proper giant cracker. So we're very stoked, and then yeah, Ayden came over and we butchered him all up, which yeah, took a fair while with the whole filming aspect, and then obviously packing him out and stuff. Yeah, got to use the walk and stalk drag bar or game bar for the first time today, which was actually really handy, because normally, like with an elk, they're huge animals, so being able to like part their back legs open, like normally it means that I can't really film it because I'm holding it for Ayden and he's obviously in there cutting, but being able to use that super light bit of kit, Ayden was able to set it up so that he could sort of get into the groin area and cut that first top leg out quite easily and just keep extending it, reflecting it back until he'd scun it and pretty much got it about to fall off, and then he said, oh, can you just grab it really quick so that I can, you know, put it in the game bag or whatever. So it was really cool to see, like, really, you know, advanced bit of technology, I guess, for how like simple it is. It's also very, very well thought out and designed. Like you can see there's a lot of drafts and planning gone into the usability of it, and it's taken into a lot of account. Like, yeah, like I said, it's super lightweight, but I think there's 7 or 8 attachments, and then yeah, so it's, yeah, there is a massive range. There's also a little lift kit which we've got, but we didn't use just purely because it's only rated for 200 kilos, which we thought the elk may blow it, and that's the bar. And yeah, we've only just got here, so we don't really want to break our only bar on the first day, or third day, or whatever it is, 4th day, 5th day now. So yeah, hence why we just butchered him on the ground, but we're able to take a heap of meat and yeah, pack it all out to our car and then start driving, getting out of here.
I also just want to mention a couple of other brands that we work closely with, and the first one will be Iron Gate Knives. I've been using their little hunter knife. It's literally a tiny little knife that fits in your hand, and I broke down a chital with it just before this trip, only just really received them, and thoroughly impressed. Like, I remember with this chital deer in particular, had a client watching as well while I was breaking it down, but I just purposely, again, through a bit of neglect and wanting to see how good this knife was, started using it, and basically told myself that I wasn't going to sharpen it. I just wanted to see, you know, how much meat I could get through, and was able to basically pretty much cape that whole animal out, do all the meat retrieval, and then break some of that meat down, you know, into chunks and, you know, whatever, debone the legs and all that type of stuff without even touching it on a stone. And then today, using it on that elk again is where it comes into play, just because it's so like small and versatile and has a super sharp edge. But being able to like then get in the joints and disarticulate stuff, like we wanted to see where the arrow hits, so we're sitting in there like basically getting in the cartilage of the ribs and really like, you know, reflecting on it, bending on it, putting a bit of force through this blade. And I've had lesser blades snap quite a few times, and this thing really handled it quite well. Again, has a sharp edge still, so we'll be using that on more game in the future on this trip. But big shout out to those guys for making a quality product. Like, I wouldn't have brought it across to the States if I didn't think it was up to the task, and to then be able to use it on this elk, which, you know, have thick skin, big animals, and break it all down comfortably. This time actually using the steel to keep it sharp was really great. So really loving those knives. And the next sort of thing I wanted to talk about, or brand I wanted to talk about, were the Ebola stock packs. So, you know, we've been carrying around a lot of gear. Before this trip, we obviously were carrying around, you know, weights and stuff and rucking on the stand machine quite regularly, trying to keep fit for the trip. But then that doesn't really stop on the trip. Like, every day we're doing plenty of miles. Like, I think the first day we did, as we said in the last podcast, we were doing like 30 Ks looking for antelope, mucking around, running up and down these hills. And we're doing that with probably minimum 20 kilo packs, if not 25 kilos at the start of the day when you got food and water and all that type of stuff. So the packs just handle it effortlessly, make it super comfortable. And then again today, where I really found it super versatile was basically carrying out and packing out all this meat and the skull and all that type of stuff. Just like whether you want to use it as just a load frame and a few clips, or have the pack on there still and the load frame, or do with it what you want. Like there's so many versatile little pouches and everything like that. And again, really, really loving our setup at the moment. Again, we touched on earlier, like the Cayuga Broadheads at day 6 shaft. Like on that big animal, again, performed really, really well. Had him down within, you know, he ran up 15 meters, came down after 10 meters and expired. So yeah, again, gear, it's one of those things that on these big hunts for us, like we've really, really refined what we like using, and that's why I guess we wouldn't mention it on the podcasts and in our socials or just through word of mouth if we didn't really believe in these products and these brands. So happy to say go check them out. But for now, as I said, James and I are probably going to sign off. We're just about to pull into camp. It is 10 past 2 a.m. here in Montana. As James said, we spent long into the afternoon packing out that bull elk, and then have driven for the last few hours from out here in the back country in the bush, where we're, you know, on public lands, driven back to meet a mate halfway and basically drop off a full grand Jeep Cherokee worth of meat off, as well as the skull. So he's kind enough to be taking that back home to the cooler and the freezer and whatnot to feed him and his friends and family for the next year. And we've basically turned around, and super fortunate, like that's such a generous thing to do, is to sacrifice his time, have a late night, you know, all these type of things, just so that he's like, no, you guys keep hunting. Like, you know, you came over here to hunt, you didn't come over here to drive meat back to me. And just things like that make this trip, you know, again, being surrounded by incredible people, we're very, very lucky. And that's why we're certainly not going to take it for granted, which is why, again, as you're hearing this, it's 2:10 a.m. and we're going to get home here hopefully by about 2:30 in the morning, and we'll jump into our Cedar Summit sleeping bags on our pads in our little Agali tents, and try and get an hour or two of sleep, and then we'll be back up at 4:30 in the morning to go and hopefully find James and elk. So he's been every bit a part of my hunt so far and filming. And again, it's one of those things, like 2 years ago I was here filming James in September on a big bull elk hunt, and it felt like either one of us could have been there, you know, letting off that shot or letting that shot fly. And it's the exact same thing today. Like all of these hunts we do, it's just one person hunting, one person filming, but the team as a collective is out here doing it together. And today, like, yeah, it was nice to share that moment with my brother, tell him I love him, that I'm happy to be out here doing it with him. And again, we're both very, very exhausted, shells of human beings. We haven't drank enough, we haven't eaten enough, and we're definitely sleep deprived, but it's all worth it because, again, as you're listening to this, we've got 1 of 6 tags filled, and we're on a mission to get all of them filled, if not chase that adventure in the process of doing it. So that's all from me. If James has any signing off thoughts, then he can contribute. Otherwise, we'll see you on another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Cheers, guys. James shrugs his head, looks tired.
I'm falling asleep. I'm ready for that pillow. I can bloody... Getting up in 2 hours is going to be a slap to the face.
Easy as. Alrighty, legends. We'll catch you on the next episode.
See you guys.